platformers. Regardless of whether you're familiar with the term, if you've played a video game, you've played a platformer. Mario, Sonic, Mega Man, Metroid, Castlevania, Shantae, Shovel Knight, Banjo-Kazooie. The list goes on. These, of course, are all games that started as platformers. That's not even to mention video game franchises that started as one genre and had platformer spin-offs. Seriously, everyone has done it at some point. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a Fire Emblem or Animal Crossing platformer in the coming years. Needless to say that platforming in video games is among one of the most popular genres, if not the most popular. While many other genres are incredibly niche, albeit successful, platformers were simple, and they remain simple. They were simple to develop, simple to understand, and simple to pick up and play, which remains a big consideration to this day when developing video games. This vague time period saw the release of the Sega Saturn, the Sony PlayStation, and the Nintendo 64, and with them, the dawn of 3D graphics being implemented into video games. One of the toughest questions developers had to answer at this time was, how do we transition our series from 2D to 3D? Long story short, some failed and some didn't. And when it came time to turn 2D franchises into their 3D counterparts, platformers were the easy choice. It's simple enough in concept, we already have the anatomy of a successful game, now we just have to account for the Z-axis. And as a wise Bobcat once said, what could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong?
So to be clear, when I compare 2D and 3D, what I'm comparing is not necessarily the graphics or art style, but more so how you control the character. Take, for example, New Super Mario Bros. Deluxe. This game is obviously made with 3D graphics, but is still only played across the X and Y axis, i.e., you can't move backwards and forwards, only left to right and up and down.
Whose team are you on? Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games.
So of course, we cannot go any further without talking about the greats, the pioneers of the 2D platformer, Sonic the Hedgehog and Super Mario. Super Mario Bros. Remains one of the top 5 best-selling video games of all time. And no wonder, too, it was so dang revolutionary. But as far as the second dimension goes, I'd be lying if I said I didn't prefer Sonic. Don't get me wrong, they're both incredible franchises, but Sonic always felt like he had a little more to offer in terms of gameplay, at least in my opinion. So how did these juggernauts transition into the third dimension? Most people cite Super Mario 64 as the first 3D platformer. But they're wrong. It was definitely revolutionary, but my god does it not hold up. This game was incredible when it released and left a mark on video game history that will echo even beyond the death of video games, but I wouldn't recommend going back to play it anytime soon. It controls awful and it looks butt ugly. Honestly, in 2020, just go play Super Mario Odyssey. I wouldn't suggest playing Sonic Adventure no matter what year it is. Look, I know there's some people who like this game, but I just can't. This game did not impress me in the slightest. Sure, it's fun to 100%, but then you've 100%ed Sonic Adventure. I just can't respect this game in an era where we have Sonic Generation, Sonic Colors, and that's it. Those are the only good 3D Sonic games.
You know, I love multiplayer. I love, experience points, and we'll talk about double XP and what that is in a second. But
now, it wasn't just your trusted friends Mario and Sonic. Oh, hell no. Every platformer icon was making the jump to the third dimension. Let's start with Mega Man. Oh man, what genre hasn't Mega Man tried yet? Mega Man made the jump and shoot into 3D with Mega Man Legends, and it was awesome, if not short-lived. Not the same Mega Man technically, but it's got the words Mega and Man in the title, so Castlevania had a rough go of it. Insanely successful and replayable 2D side-scrollers, but every time an attempt at a 3D game was made, it was always met with disdain. And just because I don't know when the next time I'll get to talk about it is, I just wanted to say I really, really do enjoy Castlevania Curse of Darkness. There, I said it, okay? Mrs. Metroid over here didn't get her 3D debut until 2002 on the GameCube with Metroid Prime, and whoa! It's a first-person shooter? Is Metroid even going to work as a first-person shooter? It did. Donkey Kong and Rayman are an interesting case study. They started in 2D, made a brief but not unsuccessful appearance in 3D, and have recently returned to their two-dimensional roots, with the release of Donkey Kong Country Returns and Rayman Origins. Both aptly named, I'd say. While technically not a platformer, you cannot have this conversation without bringing up The Legend of Zelda. No franchise, in my opinion, made the transition smoother than Zelda. If you were for some reason playing A Link to the Past when it came out, and were imagining what a 3D Zelda game would play like, Ocarina of Time is exactly what you would have pictured. I think Duke Nukem is a game franchise that got the biggest glow up in 3D. Look at this game. Now, look at this game. Sure, Duke Nukem 3D was just basically Doom, but so wasn't Chex Quest, so whatever. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Gex. My main man, Gex. Gex had an okay transition from 2D to 3D, which is to say no one played him in 2D and no one liked him in 3D. I only have fond memories of the second and third Gex games because I played them a lot with my dad when I was a kid, but replaying them nowadays, I probably shouldn't have.
Haunting really makes me hungry. Is it Taco Tuesday yet?
Bubsy the Bobcat. What a Bubsy had a lackluster 2D career and an abysmal 3D one. There are some bad 3D platformers, but at least Glover was fun for a little while. Bubsy 3D was horrendous and marked the era of, yeah, maybe making every single game into 3D isn't such a good idea. But, believe it or not, Bubsy took the Rayman Origin route in 2017, releasing a brand new 2D platformer. That was just as terrible as the old ones. Let's be honest, not every 3D platformer was good. In fact, Pac-Man World sucked, Bubsy 3D sucked, Castlevania 64 sucked, Yooka-Laylee sucked, Jak 2 sucked, Star Fox Adventure sucked, every Spyro after Year of the Dragon sucked, every Crash after Crash Bandicoot Warped sucked, Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts sucked. The list goes on. 40 Winks sucked.
Where's the X? Supposed to be right here, 10,000 paces east.
Remember this list I spattered off at the beginning of the video? Did you recognize most, if not all, of these gaming franchises? That's because they're iconic. For one reason or another, they've performed so well that they've crossed the threshold from video game character to household name. But there's one video game icon. One that everybody knows by name, and one that I haven't mentioned yet. And one that, tragically, never got a 3D platformer, no matter how close they came. An icon that has had consistent releases since its incarnation, but has so far remained in the second dimension. And that character is Kirby. Mario, DK, Sonic, Mega Man, Rayman, Pac-Man, every single icon of the 1980s and early 90s received a 3D platformer in the late 1990s, except Kirby. Why is that? He's just as deserving as all the rest of them, so what gives? I wish this was the part of the video where I said, well, here's all the reasons I could come up with based on research I've done, but sadly, it isn't. All I have for you is inference. My first theory is, perhaps Nintendo truly knew what they had and didn't want to risk something with such a strong IP. They've taken some risks before, and quite honestly, they always seem to pan out, but why fix something that isn't broken, right? My next point I want to bring up leads to a man named Masahiro Sakurai. This man has created two things that I love dearly: Kirby and Super Smash Bros. Let's briefly look at all the games he's created, shall we? So, in 1992, he created Kirby and continued making Kirby games until 2004. In 1999, he made Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo 64, and it was a massive hit, almost bigger than the sum of its parts. Who the is this guy?
Yes!
Then, he made a few more Kirby games, including a Kirby spin-off racing game, another Smash Bros. Game, and a few more Kirby games before putting the pink puff in his peripheral permanently. In 2005, he made two games I've literally never heard of. I'm sure they're great. And then we get to 2008 and onward, where he made Super Smash Bros., that one Kid Icarus game for 3DS, Super Smash Bros., and Super Smash Bros. I think it goes without saying that this guy likes making Smash Bros. But in order to focus full-time on his new franchise, he had to abandon Kirby. So maybe that's it. Maybe Kirby's new dad felt uncomfortable being the one to take Sakurai's creation into the Z-axis, once again fearing that it could ultimately fail. Now, Kirby has broached the 3D realm before, but just barely. There was a Kirby 64, but it was still just another 2D platformer. Then there was this really weird 3DS game called Kirby's Blowout Blast. Yeah, that's definitely a video game, all right. I've never met anyone who's actually played this game. I wouldn't be surprised if literally no one played it. Seriously, if you bought and played this game, please let me know in the comments, and also make sure to like and sub. This game is fine and all, but it's not a platformer. It's more of a puzzle game, if anything. I'm thinking something more along the lines of this. Don't worry, I didn't lie to you. This isn't a 3D Kirby platformer. It's actually footage from Kirby Air Ride, that spin-off racing game I was talking about. You see, in that game, there's this game mode, and in that game mode, if your warp star gets destroyed, you're legging it until you find a new one. This is the closest we've ever come to a Kirby 3D platformer. He moves exactly like you'd expect him to in a 3D environment. Looking at this footage, if you squint your eyes, you can almost pretend that this is a true blue 3D Kirby platformer. But unfortunately, it's not.
What would you do?
So I think the only right way to end this video is by telling you what I think a 3D Kirby platformer should look like. So if you've never played a Kirby game before, they typically start like this and end like this. And I think it's important that we keep that. I think an open-world, level-based game similar to Super Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie is the way to go. Kirby games are usually level-based anyways, but in terms of gameplay, I think something more along the lines of Banjo-Kazooie or Donkey Kong 64 would work nicely. Each level has a ton of things to do in it, most of which are collectibles-based, with harder-to-get collectibles locked behind objectives and used to open up more of the game in the hub world. Now, there is one problem we have to account for. Kirby can float upward and forward infinitely. So what do? Just put an invisible ceiling above every level? Well, yes. That's exactly the answer that 2D Kirby games were able to come up with, as long as the levels are designed around this mechanic, which unfortunately means there's no real room for reach the top of the thing to get to the checkpoint at the top type objectives. But it does open up the floor for some intensely hidden collectibles. See how easy this is? The game is practically writing itself. The tutorial level is Green Greens, the hub world is Planet Popstar, and the first boss is King Dedede in a wrestling arena. After you fight him, he becomes a friendly NPC. Meta Knight encounters happen in a Kirby Air Ride style minigame. And we can implement the combining of copy abilities from Crystal Shards and the Copy Essence Deluxes mechanic from the Milky Way Wishes segment of Kirby Superstar. And of course, Meta Knight, King Dedede, and Bandana Waddle Dee are playable characters you unlock by beating the game. But there's one other feature from a Kirby game I want to implement. One that means a great deal to me. So, on the Wii, there was a game called Kirby Return to Dreamland. It's exceptional, definitely my favorite Kirby game, but that's besides the point. In that game, you can unlock copy ability-specific challenges. A year after that game released, an anthology titled Kirby Dream Collection was released. This game had 6 Kirby games if you count Superstar as one game. But it also featured a brand new and updated version of those challenges I mentioned. And the last challenge you unlock is called Smash Brothers. I hate to admit it, out of respect for the legacy of Kirby, but Kirby is more recognizable as a Smash Brothers character than he is from his own games. Lightning mains Kirby in Smash Brothers, and he's literally never played a Kirby game. Not a call out by any means, just an example. I think a really cool way to end this game is with a 100% completion unlock of the Smash Brothers copy ability. One where you have all the abilities as and control exactly how the Smash Brothers version of Kirby does. It would act as both a reference to Kirby's more popular Little Brother series and a cool endgame unlock where you essentially have a collection of some of Kirby's best moves from most of his regular copy abilities. One that just so happens to conspicuously control like how it controls in Super Smash Bros.
It's over. Go home.
In conclusion, Kirby is great. If you've never played a Kirby game, I can't recommend them enough. I recommend starting with Kirby Superstar. It's easily accessible as it came out on 6 separate consoles, and it has 8 games in it, so if you're not feeling one of them, you can just move on to a different one. And hey, who knows? Maybe we'll get a true blue 3D Kirby platformer someday. I honestly doubt it at this point, but you never know. If Bubsy can fail that hard in 3D and still make a comeback today, I don't see why we should rule out the possibility of a 3D Kirby platformer. But anyways, guys, I'm gonna get going. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed making it. And until next time, I've been Thunder, and you've been watching Thunder and Lightning Gaming. Stay safe, stay clean, and we'll see you next time.